Now, as you probably know, there are many voices that question the mainstream stance on things like politics, religion, culture, and immigration, but most of those voices are cast right to the outskirts of our society. But there is one exception. He's made regular appearances on the BBC, he's just brought out his latest book, The Strange Death of Europe, via a major publishing house, and he has access to a mainstream platform that most of us don't. And it's for those reasons I was determined to ask him what his thoughts were about the alternative media and also about the topics that they might consider too controversial to cover. My next guest, Douglas Murray. The alt-right, which the alt-right are assumed to be the same thing by mainstream media, are Richard Spencer and people like that growing an actually massive, probably 30%, I'd say, in numbers of the online right-wing sphere. The debate that's dividing the whole thing is the Jewish question, whether Jews control the media, whether they're the problem, and white nationalism and white supremacy. What do you... Yeah, I mean, it's growing. I think it's bigger than people realise because it's given them a platform, it's given them a voice.
In 2017 to have a reference to the Jewish question.
What is your thoughts on that?
I don't like the term the Jewish question being used. It has nasty echoes. Look, I tell you one thing I noticed in this. That isn't new. That isn't new at all. I mean, it's always been any letters page editor at any newspaper could tell you crazy stuff about the Jews. It's to my mind, it's one of the febrile. I think it's a psychological thing. By the way, anti-Semitism is among many other things. It's a psychological thing. It is, and I wonder. I don't spend much time, that's why I ask you, I don't spend much time working out what the alt-right is or what it is now. But I do know some of this, and I do know that on questions with regards to, for instance, anti-Semitism, you can notice certain things. One of them is the return of tropes used by people who I think can't possibly know what they're doing. I mean, this doesn't have to be only alternative media, this can be mainstream media. The New Statesman in 2002, main left-wing magazine in Britain, ran a cover with the kosher conspiracy and a Star of David stabbing through. I mean, which was it? Rolling Stone a few years back did a thing on Goldman Sachs with Goldman Sachs as a sort of squid with its tentacles going around the globe. Pure Dishtana.
Well, this is because the left has sided with Islamists.
Now, well, I think it's because of a lot of things. It's a very, very complex thing. Why people fall into this. There are some people who are just out and out anti-Semites. There are some people who I think must know, but sort of like the frisson, the danger of the thing they're playing around with. Maybe that's too generous an interpretation. But I think there are a lot of people who have imbibed this through very, very dark routes, and which they may not be aware of. I remember something, sometimes this stuff comes out in strange ways. I mean, let me give you an example. Greece, for instance, has almost no Jews, but is one of the, if not the most anti-Semitic country in Europe. In opinion polls always show that the attitudes towards Jews. To a great extent, and there are all sorts of anecdotal examples of this, where Jews are blamed for things by people who just don't know what they're talking about. It becomes a sort of a thing into which they can pour all of their frustrations and rage and disappointments, a scapegoat, to use no stronger term. And I've noticed this in relation to the media. I mean, the very strange way. Some years ago, I was in New York and I was giving a speech, and somebody came over to me after my talk and he said, I wanted to know, where your family from? And I said, well, it wasn't particularly relevant to the speech I was giving, but I said, they're from the Outer Hebrides. Does this happen? And I said, well, why do you ask? He said, well, I looked at your name, and it looks like one of those names somebody's changed so it doesn't look Jewish. And I said to him, look, I said, first of all, look, as far as I know, the Outer Hebrides, zero Jewish population. Secondly, it wouldn't bother me if I was. Thirdly, you're aware of the logical problem here, aren't you? Either my name would be, very, very Jewish, or it would not be, and so forth. And then fourthly, fuck off. And the striking thing about it was that, and I have had occasionally this sort of thing comes up, and it did before the recent years of social media and all this sort of stuff. You could always find that sort of weird, kooky, another time somebody once sidled over to me and explained that all the people who ran the media and all the rich people in the world were all Jews. And I said, well, no, because the richest man in the world is Bill Gates. And I could see this moron's eyes sort of flicker something that looked like thought. And then he said, he's a secret Jew. And there's very little you can do with madness like this. Or as Jonathan Swift beautifully said once, it's impossible to reason somebody out of a position they weren't reasoned into. To my mind, anti-Semitism is such an unreasonable thing that it's very hard to reason people out of it, because, as I say, it comes in such large part from finding a receptacle into which you can pour your personal disappointment. If the whole world, by the way, sorry, one other thing, I'm going on a bit about this, but I just find it really interesting. It's also flattering, isn't it? And in a way consoling, that if there are things that explain the world, it's the same thing that conspiracy theorists find consolation in. In my view, the world is an enormously chaotic and complex, infinitely complex thing in which we have an opportunity to find some order in our lives. And I don't believe that it's all controlled. But I can see, therefore, the consolation some people must feel if it was controlled. If there were people who controlled what you were allowed to know and think, and then even more if they were all meant to be of the same ethnic or religious origin. How convenient would that be? But this is very, very important, this question, because I could see a way in which this all went very, very badly wrong. In new ways. I can think of all sorts of ways in which this can go badly wrong. But that, sorry, very quickly, one other thought on that, which is we've been through almost precisely this thing before, to what's happening at the moment with the left and anti-Semitism and the Islamist coalition, which was in the 60s. There's a brilliant book on this I'm forever recommending by Paul Berman called Power and Idealists, with a brilliant and brilliantly off-putting subtitle, All the Strange Passion of Joschka Fischer. And it describes that generation of Germans who grew up immediately after the war, who had only one absolute certainty, which was that they were not going to become Nazis. They were not going to be like their fathers. They were not going to do what their fathers did. That was the absolute single political certainty. And, of course, then there's the whole coalition from the left, with the Palestinian hijackings and so on. And one day, one of Joschka Fischer's generation of German leftists, it takes part in a thing on a plane. They've hijacked the plane, and they say Jews to the left, non-Jews to the right. They carry out a segregationist Mengele, like Mengele in Auschwitz. So Jews, and they've done it. They've become Nazis again. They've become like their fathers. The one thing they thought they weren't going to become. And they did it by going right round the other side. So it's one of those things people have to be very aware of, I think. And I don't apologise for banging on about it.
One of the things that I was reading recently was that there's a double standard on the right. They say that Islamophobia is perfectly reasonable, but anti-Semitism is totally off limits. It's totally un-okay. But both are fear of religions. What would you say about that? Would you say it's a double standard?
No. I don't accept the premise of that, the point that you're citing people as having made. If I said to you now that I thought that it was highly unlikely that Moses had, come down from Mount Sinai with a tablet with exactly 10 commandments on it, and they were literally engraved on a stone and so on and so forth. No reasonable person, no reasonable Jew that I can think of would say that's anti-Semitism. They would say, okay, you're an atheist, you don't believe in the revelation thing. If I said to you, look, I think it's highly unlikely that 1400 years ago, an illiterate tradesman in the Arabian Peninsula had voices sent direct, an archangel sent direct from God to sort of do versions of the Old and New Testament with sort of bits added in a sort of not very well plagiarized sort of form. That would be very, very regularly described as Islamophobia. And that's one of the reasons why I've pushed back against that term so much. Or as a late friend, Christopher Hitchens, used to say, if you did it in the Christian context and said, I don't believe that a virgin was impregnated by the Holy Spirit, I think it's more likely that a young Jewish girl told a fib. Very few people would say, you hate all Christians, you're against all Christians. So it's okay, you're an atheist and you don't believe in the virgin birth. They wouldn't say Christianophobe, you want to wipe out 2 billion Christians worldwide. So we have to have the right to criticize religious thoughts. And there is undoubtedly a very, very complex and difficult area about the extent to which that overlaps with people's identity and their, as it were, their holy places. And I think that deliberately people have made the Islamophobia thing happen in order to win for their faith by saying that anything and everything which they don't like is a phobia. But that is a different thing from, as I say, from anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is historically a dislike of Jews as Jews, and the invention of wild, concocted conspiracies about what Jews are said to do and who they are. So no, I don't agree with it. And by the way, maybe also in Europe, maybe we should be sensitive to an extent. Maybe there should be a certain, I know that there must be some people who go, God, I'm so bored with people boring on about the Holocaust. Yeah, wipe out 6 million Jews in a few years, in living memory. And you think we should sort of have dropped it by now? We shouldn't forget these things, no.
So that was just a clip, but to watch the full extended interview, then head over to patreon.com/theculturereport.